Hello, and welcome back to another live episode of Alias Nerd. And we're going to be coding up the website here. Specifically today, we're going to be fixing a bug that we found last time where the videos didn't show up on the home page properly. We're also going to be working on getting the tests 100% complete. We had a little 3 tests fail prior with the what is it, the subscription domains. They weren't working in the test suite. So today's episode will just fix all that. Now, I've already recorded this episode in its entirety, and the problem is I didn't plug in the microphone, so there's no audio through the whole thing. So I debated on perhaps going and bringing back the code to the original state and then just redoing all the code, but that could screw something up with the Git repository on all 3 of the different, like the Heroku, the GitHub, and all that kind of stuff. And it might be confusing for people who are following along, like down the road, when they're following along the Git repository. They might think, well, what the heck's going on here? So what we're going to do is just review everything I did in for the changes in that last video, which I'm not going to publish because it has no audio. So essentially what happens is in the account admin panel, there's some ad IDs here. Sorry, not ad IDs, but video IDs. There's one for like an ad, which is the default. There's one for a temp, which is a video that I could play instead of this one, instead of the default video. And then there's a live stream ID, which I can turn on and off using this live Boolean field here. So essentially we have this video playing right now on the front page here, and I can switch that over to the live video by simply clicking this and hit save configuration. And when I go back here, it's a completely different video. So um, you can see now that it's pretty much working. I think I can add another video here and save this. I'm going to turn off live. So now this video is going to be the one that's going to show up. It should be, I think it's like a kid or something. Yeah. So he's going to teach you the 4th dimension or something along those lines. Um, but there, it's working. So let's go over on how I got it working. So in here, we're going to take a look, and this was in the controllers in the welcome controller. So essentially it was a very easy fix. The first thing is the video was not switching off of the, I think it's the stream one worked. No, it was the video ad ID worked. So this one worked here. So what essentially was happening is it wasn't picking the video temp ID. Like first thing it does is it goes through here and says is the Boolean live set, and if it is set, then use the video stream ID. And if not, then go down here and check if the video temp ID is set, and if that's not set. So essentially what was happening is if I didn't put anything in that field in the form, what was entered into the database was a blank string. So it was something, it was not nil, it was an actual blank string. So it was thinking that there was a config video temp ID, even if I didn't enter in a number. So it was trying to use it, and it was using a blank string, so no video was showing up, blah, blah, blah. So to solve that, I added this dot present at the end here. So it just checks to see if this is a nil or an empty string. So if it is actually something, then it's going to use it. But if it's not something, then it's not going to use it, and it's going to come down and use the video ID. So that's how I fixed that section. Now the video stream ID wasn't working because in this line of code, I actually had at config_nerd.live. So it was just printing out the Boolean true or false, which isn't really doing anything. That's not what it should be. So all I had to do is change that over to video_stream_ID, and then that's how it gets the actual ID there. And then I also added this just to make a little bit cleaner. I said check initially if it is a live, if the live Boolean is set, and check if there's a video stream ID present. So if I set the Boolean to true for live, it's going to go and it's going to grab the stream ID. But if I hadn't set the stream ID up, so then it sort of doesn't make any sense. And that way I can always keep the stream ID in there and just turn off and on the live Boolean. So that works properly. And at the same time, I can turn on and off the live Boolean. And if I forget to set the stream ID or forget to delete it or something, then it's not going to run a blank video. It'll revert down to one of these 2 videos. So that sort of saved all of that. That's how that worked. So the video started working again. Now another thing I did was, let's see here. I started working on the tests. So I'll just go down to the tests here. Oh, one thing I did inside of here for the model, which has to do with config again, is I set a validator. So this validates that at least the video ad ID is present. So that is a requirement to set that form. This may cause issues later on. Actually, this is only going to be validating if when the form is submitted. So it's never really going to create an issue, I don't think. Let me just think here. Because what happens is, let me think. When it's initially created, I think it does that in the application controller. So here, does it do that? Oh yeah, first or create. So what essentially I should be doing is setting a default for that. But for now, this could cause trouble. It's working now because I've already got one created. I'm pretty sure you need to do first or create, and we can set a default for something. So let's check that out. We may want to add that in now. Rails first or create with, let's look it up and see what it says. So we want to set a default on that video ad ID because we require one to be set when you create it. So let's look here. Attributes, nil. Okay, so what is with all that? Okay, so I'm going to say I can say do, and then I can set some things onto it. Yeah, because I only want it to do it if it creates. Okay, let's see what this says. Specify the data you're looking for. If it exists in the table, the first instance will be returned. If not, then create is called. If a block is provided, the block will be executed only if a new instance is being created. Okay, good. So that's sort of what I want. So I want to do here a do statement. So let's run that, because if I ever use this again, that will be an issue. I can already tell. So, whoops, don't need that. Okay, so what we're going to do here is say, we'll call this config nerd. Okay, so config nerd dot video ad ID is a requirement, so that's just going to be set to we'll set it to an empty string. That way it works, but it just nothing shows up. So I'll know to set it because nothing shows up. So good config nerd, that's good. Okay. So that's sort of what I did there. I created that requirement to have at least the video ad ID because we need some sort of a video show up. And it also helps later on with the testing. So let's get to that testing. That's pretty much all the code I wrote, I'm almost certain. And the rest of it was for code coverage. So in here we have the config nerds controller. Now what I've done in here, actually we should probably start with the one that was screwed up, which is the subscriptions controller, because it was such an easy fix. And thanks to a GitHub issue, I just used the recommended fix for it, which was pretty basic. You just, in the host here, I had, what did I have? Test.host. So I just changed that over to localhost. And that one here, I did localhost. And then there's one more down here, which was localhost right there. Okay, so that's pretty much all that required to get those passing. And so that completed that, so that bug was fixed. And then I had some code completion stuff, like the code coverage stuff. It wasn't 100% coverage anymore, so I had to go into the config nerds. And we had a couple of these basic ones up top here, but what I added was, well, I'm pretty sure this was already there. Okay, then I added should not update configure due to invalid parameter. So this is trying to update it, but the video ad ID is blank. So, oh, okay, that's going to cause us an issue then. Poop. Okay, so I got to go back here, that thing that we just did. So it can't be blank. It has to be. Oh, where do we going to do that? That's in the application controller. Okay, so here we have to do some sort of an ID. So I'm just going to say replace with ID, and that'll get us going. Okay, so we will head back here. All right, so we added this test here to say that it had to be a valid video ID, video ad ID, I should say. So that test does that. Then we added another one. Actually, we already had that one. Should not update configured if not admin. Should not update if not signed in. We had that one. We had that one. We had that one. Should not get edit. Seeing here, should update configured. I mean, I think we had most of these. I just added I think I might have just added this invalid parameter one. And then we have we did the subscriptions controller, we did the configured controller welcome. Oh, that's not the test. Then we did the welcome tests. I think we did, okay, so this is where we were testing for that like feature that we had. So some of the code in that like feature was not being tested. So here we have, we're testing if the visitor has liked something. So we have the configured, what we're doing up top of here. So everything here and up, we're doing is setting the cookie that says the voting ID for some sort of a voter. So I created this cookie here. First I created the configured, and then, I fetched it, and then I got I created a cookie jar, and then I created a signed cookie of 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on the request, I put a cookie on the request for the voting ID based on that cookie jar voting ID, that signed cookie. And then I created a voter, and I gave that voter the same ID I put into the cookie. And then I saved the voter. And then I said voter likes at configured. So that set up the like all the way back to the cookie, and set up the actual like between the voter and the model configured. And then after I was done that, I can go back and do my normal getting of the index. I can check that that was successful. And technically, I don't really need this assigns project thing, but that's fine. I might as well just delete it. It's just sort of repeated stuff there. Okay, then I have a bunch of tests here that I created for checking to see what video stream ID shows up. And this was sort of the bug that I initially had. So this goes through and it says, we want to check if the stream ID. So the way I'm doing that is I create a configured, and then on configured, I set live to true. In this case, it depends on what test we're doing, but then I also set a stream ID, a temp ID, and an ad ID for the videos. And then I save all of that. And then when I go through here, I can say get the index and then check based on these settings on configured, check that the assert the value, or the assert equal that the video home ID, which is a variable I set in the controller, assert that that is set to live. And that's sort of what I set up here. So I have live, temp, and add for the IDs. And then I do the same thing here where I say it's not, if live is false, and I have the same IDs, and I check if live is false, what happens? It should be set to temp. And then I go down here and say if live is false and temp is missing, then it should be set to add, and that's how that tests that. And then I say if live is true, but stream ID is false, is blank, and temp ID is blank, then it should still be set to add. And that just asserts that that is equal to add down here. Okay, so that's what those tests sort of does. It checks all those different scenarios that I wanted and how that actually works. Very, very simple to do, but it just takes a little bit of setup and then you're good to go. And that tests that bug that we had originally, so I have tests for that now. Votes, I think I might have done some voting tests in here. I did, I added this should update liked attribute with a cookie. So I originally had this test where it's just update the linked attribute so you can send to post the vote up. So I just wanted to make sure if you did send to vote up, if you did post to the vote up action, then it would still work if we had a cookie present. So in this case, I do the same thing here. I create a cookie jar, I sign a cookie into it of 1, 2, 3, 4. And then down here, I place that cookie into the request under the voting ID, same thing. And then I post to vote up to make sure it still works, and it should just redirect to root path. It's not much there, just making sure that no errors pop up if that is the case, if there's a cookie or not a cookie. And based on those, I don't think search projects config cards yet. Yeah, nothing else was changed there. So, oh yeah, fixtures, I did do something in fixtures. Now, config nerd and fixtures, this was not set up, so I simply had to create a video ad ID and a video stream ID in there. I didn't really need the stream ID, but I just set it anyways. And then we could do a video temp ID and set that to temp ID. Yep, so that's good. In voters, I don't think I did anything. No, I didn't really change anything anywhere else. So that's all I really had to do there. I didn't do anything in models, but let's see, maybe I could. Technically, I could try and create one with, see this says it creates that, but I can try creating if the name is missing. So I could do the same type of thing here, because we only have one validation, so we could go into here and paste that, and then say we can do %s for changing over project to config nerd. Do that to all of them, and then we could also do the same thing to project lowercase over to config underscore nerd. Change that, all of them. And then what we could do is delete this, boom, and boom. Okay, so we have all of this stuff here which needs to change to video add ID. Change 2 words, and this could be video, or sorry, add ID. That's sort of the theme we're going with here. So I'm going to change this word to video temp ID. And this is 4 words to temp ID. Change word to video stream ID. And this is simply change 3 words, I believe. Yeah, so this is stream ID. And this one we will change to live. And this is change 4 words. Nope, not quite. This will be true. So this is just going to check if it's valid or not. So I'm going to actually copy that down to here and get rid of this. And all I need to do is get rid of the add ID here. And this should now be not valid because we're missing the video add ID. So I'm just going to change this to video add ID missing. Okay, so that should work. I'm just going to run or save that. So there we go. We added another test just for testing that model. And that's about it. So that's everything that I changed in the last video. Now that took a lot longer in the last video, but that's because I was trying to figure things out as I went along and deciding what I wanted to do. So what we're going to do now though is just run the test to make sure that it's all still working, number one. Whoops, don't need to do that. Okay. So we'll quit through there, and then we'll quit through here. And then queue all. I have to quit here because I didn't know those were open. So we're going to run a rake test. and make sure that everything is going to pass. So not only will everything pass, hopefully, we'll also get 100% on the coverage. So everything passes, and we get 99.5. So we did screw something up there with some of that stuff that we just wrote. So let's go back into here, and I'm going to do this, 99.5. So it's a controller, application controller. So, oh, okay. So I wrote this bit of code to make sure that the config nerd does get something put into that video ad ID, since it is now a requirement. So what I need to do is make sure that I hit this. So I need to, let's see here. The problem is there is no time that I don't have one of these already. Let me think. I wonder if I really need the fixture ever. I don't think I do. Because that's the problem. The fixture always gets run, so there's always going to be one, and there's never not going to be. So I could delete one just to test that, but that's sort of weird. Let's go into Vim here, and let's see if what fails if we get rid of the fixture. But that's not good for future proofing, because someone might need a fixture and then that'll break stuff, or that won't test that code. So let's write an actual test for config nerds controller. Okay. So we need to, let's do it right up here and just say test should create a config nerd model. If none exists. Okay, so that's a little bit messy, but we'll get the idea. We'll fix the spelling here. Okay, and so in order to test this, what we need to do is delete the existing one. So we're going to do config nerd dot first dot destroy, and then we will just get edit, and then assert response is going to be a success. We can also assert just wondering here. I'm going to split screen this and go into the projects one, projects controller test, because there is a thing where we're going to assert assigns. Let's see at the very beginning here. Okay, so we want to assert that it does assign. Okay, so not this is going to be control nerd, so or config nerd, config nerd. Did I put that in the right spot? Okay, yeah, so we're destroying that, and it does assign one. Okay, good. So I'm just going to quit that. So this should run through, and hopefully that works. Let's go through here and run rake test. Let's see what happens there. So it's interesting, and the last time I ran through this, I did write a lot of that code, but you know, you still leave out a couple things here and there. So I had to add that thing into the application controller to get that to work. And then I forgot to write the test, or I didn't forget, the code coverage is no longer there. So we are hitting 100% of our lines of code with this, so that's good, but it didn't pass. So what are we doing here? We want to create one if none exists. It redirected. Interesting. Expected response to be success, but it was a redirect. I'm going to go here and just refresh this. We can see we got 100%. So it is creating this. That's fine. But what is the redirect is what I'm trying to figure out. So let's go into here and check out. Yeah, because here, if I just, oh, okay, that's why. If I want to edit, I need to be an admin. That is the issue. So I'm just going to yank this and put it right here. So we destroy the first config nerd, we set up an admin user, sign that admin user in, and then we can get edit, check that it's response successful, and that it actually did set a config nerd, meaning that it created a brand new one. So I'm going to save this, and let's run these rake test again. All right, so hopefully that made sense. It's sort of hard to go through and remember all the little changes that someone does. What we could do is go through the GitHub and just look at how we can explore code that way, which might be a bit interesting. So we got all our tests passing, 100% code coverage, perfect. Let's just hit up the status and see what we changed here. Changed quite a bit actually. We changed some tests. We changed controller, application controller. So I'm going to pretty much say git add. We'll just add all that in, and we'll git commit this over to a message saying updated the first or create of the config nerd in the application controller. Also wrote tests. So pretty much that's all we did. We didn't do much else. Updated the first. Okay, that's good enough. All right, so let's just push this up into GitHub, and then we will also push that up into Roku. All right, and now let's explore everything we did. I sort of went through it in the code, but this is probably a better way to explore. So we done in today, June 10th, I just did this first to create of the config nerd application. That's what I just did. So let's just click in here, and we can see everything I just did. Now it's probably best if I just start at the beginning of the day. So we will go into the commits, and I did a couple of these little ones that I thought I already solved it. So I did this commit here with a simple change that I told you about. This is what the code used to look like, the configure.videotemp.id, and I simply added the .present because that checks if it's an empty string as well as being nil, which was important because just leaving the field blank in the form was placing an empty string in the actual database. And so that line of code right here was not working, so I just had to add this .present. So that's what I did there. Now, the next thing I did was I moved up here and I said, well, why is this not working, the live? Because that solved the bottom one, the temp ID one, but the live one wasn't working, the live ID. So I realized that inside of this if statement, it just said config nerd.live for returning a video ID. And that's not right. So then I realized, well, I gotta change that over to config nerd.video stream ID. So if it is live, then I set that to a stream ID, and that's what gets placed in video home ID. So that was that commit, pretty basic. Oops. Then we have, this was a much bigger one. So let's take a look at this one. So on that same sort of area of code here, this live, we're inside the welcome controller still. Instead of just saying live, like I said, I added this and configured streaming ID is present to make sure that not only is this Boolean set to true, but I also actually have a streaming ID that will show up. So that was sort of an important little thing I added. And then in configured, I also added this validation, which wasn't there before, of presence of true on the video add ID. At least that video must be present in the model when you save it. And then let's see here, we have the edit.html. Oh yeah, this is an error that was showing up. We forgot to go over this previously. I had this bug in here which had the app project for the errors. So because I set this as generating the error if add ID was not there, what happens is this was actually getting hit all of a sudden, which it wasn't doing before. It was having an error on configured. But once it entered into here, it was looking for this app project errors. But because that was where we copy pasted the code from before, that's where I did it. And I keep saying we, but I did that. And that was a mistake. So I had to change, anytime it said project, I had to change it to configured. So it happens twice in this little block of if statement. So it happens this project here, change that to configured on both those instances. This is some coverage stuff, which I'm just going to skip through. I'm still baffled that it puts it up into GitHub, but whatever. I could figure it out, I guess, if I wanted to. More code coverage stuff. Okay, what do we got here? We got a controller. Okay, so this is the test. So I added this, which we went over. It should not update configured due to invalid parameter, and this is setting the video ID to blank. So that's what I added, and that sort of runs that test. And then this is fixing the subscription thing where I changed the test.host over to localhost. I did that in the 3 locations. Pretty simple change to fix that up. Here I did the votes controller test where I created the cookie jar for the cookies. And you need to do this cookie jar in order to sign a cookie into here, which my code utilizes signed cookies, so I need to do that in the test as well. And then here is where I wrote this test for updating with a cookie. So all I had to do is just copy paste this block of text down to here and then add this one line saying request cookies voting ID, and I stuck the jar voting ID inside the jar into there, and that works good. And then in the welcome controller test, this is where I did a bunch of those tests where the visitor has liked. I actually set up the cookie jar ahead of time, vote on that, and then I just do the index and just make sure that it still works after they've liked it. And then I added all these with the missing video stream ID, making sure that the video stream ID is set as the home ID. This is the video temp ID as the home ID, and this is the video add ID as the home ID. And this is just that edge case where with the video add ID, if the video stream ID is missing. So if this happens to be missing, and even if live is true, it'll still use the add ID, which this test just verifies that. And then here's where I talked about that the fixtures for control nerd or config nerds. This was not set up previously. It just had nothing there. So all I did was just set that up a little bit more. And that's everything I changed in that last video. So, and then this is the video. This is the change that we just completed, and then that's it. That's the most current and up-to-date application code. So that is that, plus we have the code coverage at 100%. Right here, boom, everything is peachy. So really sorry that I couldn't do all that live coding. I missed the audio before, but I wanted to make sure I did have this video up so that you guys could tell how I fixed those bugs in the previous one. There's also in the issues, there was an issue reported for the 3 tests failing. So thank you very much here, Idoan, I think that's how you pronounce it. Where it just said you need to change the test.host over to localhost in the subscription controller test. So that was those 3 tests failing. So I said, yeah, I sort of knew about that. Let's see what I wrote here. I have not looked at those failing tests too hard yet. Path problem, localhost. So I was going to get those tests passing soon. I was contemplating on rewriting that code entirely, but it seems to work quite nice. He just said thanks for the reply. I'll just answer this question here, I suppose. Max when using. So this is using the localhost thing. This has to do with completely on the dev server on how that works. So on the development server, having it to go over to localhost, and then the test.host, I just sort of wrote that because that's what I usually use in the testing. So I just had to switch that over. It really is no big deal either way. Um, the other features I plan on adding to this app. Now this app could continue to grow forever and ever. For right now, this is the most basic features that I have, but there could be a ton of stuff added to this. So the imagination, like anyone's imagination, can be used to, come up with different features. Like, I don't know. There's no real way of saying what other features I'm going to add because it could be anything and it could be everything. So just stay tuned to see what comes out of this application. But I'm going to be moving on to other applications very soon to start doing other things. Do you also plan on showing how to deploy this to DigitalOcean and other hosting providers? I have used DigitalOcean and I've used quite a few other ones, but for as of right now, I don't have any plans to, but I could in the future for sure make some videos for that. And then here's where I just closed it out. Just say I made the suggested changes to the subscription controller test. All tests are 100% coverage at this time, and I just closed the issue. So if you do see any issues or have anything that you want to talk about, you can open up an issue, or you can fork this whole thing over or clone it onto your own machine and create your own features, and then send some pull requests, and I will look into that for you. But anyways, that's that. So thanks for tuning in. Again, I'm very sorry that this wasn't all done live for you. I felt so stupid. I finished recording, then I looked down and I didn't even plug the mic in into the computer, so no audio was recorded. But I think I have it all figured out now. Hopefully the audio is recording here, and we went through every bit of code change that I've done in the last little bit, so you guys are still up to date. So thanks very much, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.